G'day and welcome to this course on Google Ads. My name's Mike Rhodes and my lovely friend Molly Pittman has asked me to put this together for you. So we're going to spend around about an hour, just to set your expectations, around about an hour, maybe a little over, talking about Google Ads. So particularly if you are coming at this from having done Facebook, that's my assumption that you know little to nothing about Google Ads, but you know a bit about marketing, you know about your business or your customer, whether you're doing this for your own business or for an agency. That's sort of who I'm pitching this at. Hopefully we've got that about right. Molly's asked me to do it, I guess, partly because I wrote the book with Perry. I've been doing Google Ads for 14 years now. So run Australia's largest independent AdWords agency. And I've been teaching this pretty much since 2005. I love teaching. I'm a teacher at heart. So we do it. All of this is based on actual results and practical. This isn't based on theory. So this is real life stuff. And just to set the scene of how this is maybe different, but then also this gives us our agenda that we're going to follow over the course of the next hour. Somebody's out there looking. They're looking for what it is that you sell, the products and services that you sell. Now, I'm going to focus predominantly on search in this course, so it's quite different from the more top of funnel stuff that you may be used to if you do a lot of Facebook, putting remarketing to one side. So how are you going to show your stuff? How are you going to show up in front of this person searching? You've got to have keywords in your account. We'll dig into what those are and how to find them. They're going to see your ad, and if they click it, then you pay some money to Google. You get to choose exactly where they go next, and you get to measure what they do when they get there. Based on all of that, we then make changes to improve results over time. So that's the game we're playing. And every time you see one of these slides with Wally here, that's going to be the next chunk of content. Some of these will be a minute, some of them will be 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see how many stories I tell. Was going to be doing this for Molly, but poor thing is absolutely jet lagged and fast asleep right now. So we're just going to crack on and do it anyway. Just me and you. So what and why of AdWords? I think that AdWords is the greatest direct response marketing machine ever invented. The instant feedback of being able to try something and did it get the result that you expected? Did it get the result that you want? Or do we need to go back to the drawing board and try again? So don't have the mindset of, oh God, I've got to get this right. I've got to choose the perfect keywords. I've got to write the perfect ad. Everything that we do at the beginning is just the starting point. It will not stand still very long. So if you're an old school marketer and you remember the days of yellow pages or maybe letterbox drops and stuff like that, that was very set and forget. This is anything but. This is the opposite of set and forget. We're going to make a lot of changes. We're going to talk about how to optimize your account in a little bit. It is the traffic storm. In between them, Google and Facebook account for something like 90+% of all growth in online marketing spend. But if you've got an itch to scratch, I mean, Amazon obviously is the elephant in the room there as well. They're making great inroads here. But for the most part, unless you're buying a physical product that you already know exists, you might go to Amazon. Where we spend all of our time and where all of the advertisers are for a reason is on Google and Facebook. Again, I'm going to assume that you have some Facebook knowledge and come at this from you've never played with AdWords before. So just to set the scene, we have various corners of Google Ads. Sorry, if I say AdWords, it's because they just changed the brand. It's now called Google Ads because it's not about just the words anymore. It's not just about search. And they've probably changed that brand because most people, or many people, think of this when they think Google AdWords. They think that it's just text ads at the top of the page when you do a Google search. But there is far, far more to it. So it includes Google Shopping, and Google Shopping in the last chunk of data that we have for Christmas of 2017 shopping clicks accounted for something like 70% of non-brand clicks. So Google know that consumers like these little ads, the little square ads with the short little description and the price and the store underneath. Therefore, they get lots of clicks. So that's obviously good for Google. Google make money off these, but Google know that advertisers make lots of money off these. And certainly all the clients that we run Google Shopping ads for would never want us to stop. Very, very highly profitable campaigns. We've also got display ads. So Google have over 2 million websites that are part of their Google Display Network, or GDN, and over 1 million apps that are part of that network too. And throughout that display network, you can show banner ads, you can show Gmail is part of this, and you can show remarketing ads. You may be probably already doing some remarketing on Facebook. And of course, Google do video as well. You may well be running video ads already on Facebook. You can probably take some of those ads, load them up as a YouTube video, and start running those as ads. YouTube is an area that Google are trying desperately to grow. You can get some good deals depending on how much money you're spending, but it's definitely something that should be part of your mix as you think about Google Ads. So all 4 of these areas are part of Google Ads. And why use it? So that's what it is, but why use it? Well, it's incredibly fast to get going. It's very fast to get up and running and start to see some results. It is very, very scalable. So particularly when we start talking about things like Google Display Network, there is an almost infinite number of people to show ads to every day. Over a billion people use YouTube every month. There are over 1 billion hours of video watched every month now. There are over 1 billion page views on the Google Display Network. I've just been coaching a mate who is approaching 10,000 leads per day with his Google Display campaign. Tons of scale out there. So even a keyword campaign, a search campaign, which is naturally going to have some limits. There's generally a finite number of people that search for a particular term each day, but people are weird. People use hundreds and hundreds of different terms to find the same thing. That's part of the game, is to find all of those keywords, all of those search queries that people use. The thing that makes it the measurable or that direct response marketing machine is the fact that it's measurable, is the fact that we can see what people do. And this kind of blew my mind when I realized this, maybe, 10 years ago, that we're looking at these results of how that 1,000 people over there behaved in order to predict how the next 1,000 people are going to behave. And even though they are completely different groups of people, if 10% of that group did something, then it's very likely that around 10% of that next group of people are going to do that same thing as well. The law of large numbers is on our side here, and as much as we all love to think that we're a special snowflake, really, we tend to all behave in a very similar and predictable manner, which is the last thing here. Is once you get this dialed in, it is very, very predictable. We have got campaigns that have been running for clients for years. I mean, yes, obviously we are adding new campaigns to that all the time. We're making changes all the time to continually sort of top up those campaigns and make them work a little bit better all the time. But we have campaigns that have been running for a long time that return, let's say, 10 to 1 consistently, month after month after month after month. It's very predictable too in terms of seasonal patterns. We've got a client that sells swimwear, and you can see the same spike. It starts every year around September, peaks in January because the Australian summer is in December, January, Feb, and then slows down, and then once we get to about March and Easter, it drops off and we've got a dip during the middle of the year. We've got that same pattern for 11 years of data. It's incredibly predictable, and we can use the nature of that predictable data in our favor to make ROI for either our own business or our client's business. But the first thing you need to know are the numbers. And the most important thing that I want you to get super, super clear on is what's a customer worth to you. how much would you cheerfully pay to get a new customer? Obviously, that's going to depend hugely on what you're selling, but also on your business model. Are you expecting to sell to this person over and over again, or are you one and done? If you're selling a 30 grand garage or a shed to go down the bottom of the garden or something like that, then you're probably not expecting a lot of repeat custom, in which case that first transaction had better be profitable. But if you're selling young woman's fast fashion and your average customer comes back to you 4 times a year, and some people come back to you 15 times a year, then you don't need to make as much money on that first sale. So you've got to be very, very clear on what the goal is here. To know that, you've got to know your break-even point, at which point, how much money do I have to spend acquiring a new lead or acquiring a sale where I make $0? And is that then different from what we're aiming for? So by that I mean, let's say my break-even is $100. So as soon as I've spent $100 acquiring, let's say, a lead, I know that I'm not making any money on the sale. But what should my target CPA be? Again, it depends on, so CPA being cost per action. My target, in other words, what I want to go get leads for, will be probably somewhere between 0 and 100 if my break even is 100. Sometimes it might be a little bit higher. You've probably heard the expression of a loss leader, and that's where you might go backwards a little bit on the initial sale because you know you're going to make it up later. We got a client that sells vitamins. Now for them, it's worth spending a bit of money on the front end and paying a bit to buy a new customer because they know that their average customer is going to come back and order month after month after month after month. They don't have to make that very, very first sale super profitable. So know your numbers, know what that target is. And ideally, you're going to have just one number that you're going to optimize for. And that is not going to be a vanity metric like the number of impressions. And I still see agencies talk about this. I still see agency reports saying, oh, not only did we get you 20 million impressions that you agreed to, we managed to get you a bonus 2 million impressions this month. Whoop-de-bloody-do. I couldn't care less about the number of impressions, the number of people that saw my ad. What I care about are outcomes. But I'm not just going to focus on the number of conversions, the number of leads or the number of sales, because if my break even is $100 and you get me 1,000 leads but they all cost $500 each, then I'm not going to be very happy. So it's probably going to be that CPA number. It might be both, honestly, because profit is a function of both of those things, how many conversions and the cost per conversion. And then ROAS, just in case you're not familiar with the jargon here, return on ad spend. So similar to ROI, just calculated slightly differently. But that's probably, when you start off with your first AdWords account, you're probably going to focus on a metric like CPA. How much are these leads costing me? You would probably, or most businesses would rather have a lower volume of leads, but profitable leads, than a high number of leads, but each one is losing them money. So CPA generally is where you start, and then we can go from there. So we're going to start by just taking a quick tour through the Google Ads interface. Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, taught me years and years ago that whenever you learn something new, the first thing you need to do is to understand the meanings of just a few words. Doesn't matter if you're learning Italian or real estate deals or Google Ads, just understanding the meaning of maybe it's a couple of dozen words makes everything else fall into place. So I'll start by just giving you a very, very high level of what a Google Ads account looks like. Excuse me while I take a quick drink. So you're going to probably, rarely are you going to have more than one Google Ads account or an AdWords account. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. Inside your ads account, you will start with just the one campaign, but over time you might add more and more campaigns, and I'll talk in a little bit about why you might have more than one campaign. And then a campaign contains a number of things called ad groups. So that's kind of analogous to ad sets inside of Facebook. And then the ad group contains a number of ads and a number of keywords. And I'll give you a different visual for that in a little bit, another way of thinking about it. Just so you got a few different versions, so one of them hopefully sticks. So we have one or more campaigns. Each campaign contains one or more ad groups, and each ad group has to contain at least one ad, probably 2 or 3, and at least one keyword, and usually somewhere between 1 and 20. And we'll talk about why you might have more or less in a minute. So let's have a look inside. Let's open up Google Ads and have a look inside. So, obviously the first thing you're going to need to do is to create a new Google Ads account, but you're smart. I'm going to figure that you know how to do that. I'm going to start with this tour, and then we'll work through the building blocks of keywords and ads and ad groups and campaigns, and then we'll stick all of that together and build your first campaign. So I'm going to walk down some of these tabs down the left hand side here. You don't need to worry about all of them for your first Google Ads campaign. Over time, as you get more sophisticated, you might play with some of these other ones, but Molly gave me an hour. I'm going to try and squeeze this into an hour. It might take a little bit longer, so I have to obviously leave some stuff out. I'll tell you later. If you want more training and stuff, I've got multiple training courses that dive really deep into how to optimize into Google Display or Shopping or Data Studio, which is a reporting tool. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to try and give you the 20%, or even the 20% of the 20% that gets you most of the way to a successful Google Ads account. I want to squeeze as much value in this hour as possible. So stop talking and get on with it, Rhodes. Right. So you've got a recommendations tab. The reason I want to call this out is please do not go scroll down this page hitting apply all. So a lot of these recommendations are, they're all machine driven. So no human has sat there and curated these. These are all created by the machine. Some of them will make a bit of sense. Some of them won't make much sense at all. And you can see the first 2 recommendations across the top of the screen here, repairs and bids and budgets, in that box right at the top, are going to improve my account by 0.1%. So you probably don't want to be spending much time on things that are going to give you a 0.1% improvement. I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule and using your time productively during the day. So use this screen as a guide only. Please don't blindly follow everything that's on there. But it's a great way to help you diagnose, particularly early on when you don't know much about Google Ads. A great way to diagnose and find potential problems. Just then add in, before you hit any buttons, a layer of thought there of why are they recommending this? Is that a good thing for me? Should I apply that? Okay, so working down the left hand side, the first tab is campaigns. So again, you'll start with one, you'll add over time. You don't necessarily have to have the 15 or so that this particular client has, and I'll talk in a bit about the different reasons for those, but I will just quickly work along the top row, so above the numbers, budget, status, bid strategy, clicks, and so on. So each campaign is going to have a budget, typically a daily budget. Status is going to be eligible or maybe paused or removed. Bid strategy we might talk about a little bit later on, but for the most part you're going to start by manual bidding. So you're going to choose how much you want to spend each time somebody clicks on one of your ads. A click, I'm going to assume you're fairly familiar with the terminology of clicks and impressions. CTR is the click-through rate, how many people click for every 100 impressions. Average CPC, cost per click. So obviously it's free to show an ad. You only pay something to Google when somebody clicks. So for this campaign over the last 30 days here, those 31,000 clicks have cost on average 39 cents each, for a total cost of 12 grand and change. Now, average position is a bit confusing. A position of 0.0 is a shopping ad. So those are those square image ads that show across the top of the page. Your search campaigns will then have an average position of somewhere between 1 and a much higher number. 1 being the first position on the page, 2, 3, 4. There's typically 4 ads at the top of the page, maybe positions 5, 6, 7 at the bottom, typically 3 ads at the bottom of the page. That differs a little bit by device, and it also changes depending on what you're searching for, but also how you've behaved in the past. So Google will show you possibly a different number of ads based on how you've behaved in the past. But an average position of 2.5, the second row down there, means that on average you're showing position 2.5. So think of it as, well, half the time I'm showing in position 2, half the time I'm showing in position 3. On average, I'm in position 2.5. Number of conversions, we'll talk about conversions, one of the most important parts of getting your Google Ads account up and running. How many things did you get people to do? That could be leads, it could be sales, it could even be little things like watching a video or downloading a PDF or clicking on a particular button, even viewing a really important page on your site. You get to choose what the thing is that you measure, and then you can aim towards that, get more of those. And in this case, it's a sale. And then cost per conversion, how much did each one of those conversions cost me? If I got 200 odd conversions and that cost $3,000, then each one of those costs $16.62. Just continuing on that second row of data there. So within campaigns, remember we said there are ad groups, so you can dig into each of those campaigns and see the ad groups and all the associated stats that go with those. And each ad group contains one or more ads. So you can see on the ads tab, you can see the ads. Don't really need to worry too much about all the other stuff on that tab yet. And the other thing an ad group holds are keywords. And we'll talk more about keywords in the next section. So we have keywords and ads inside of ad groups, and then multiple ad groups inside of campaigns. And generally speaking, you're going to see the same or very, very similar columns of data at all of these levels. So you're just drilling deeper and deeper and deeper into the machine to get more and more data and more sort of finer grained look at what's working and what's not working. And then we'll talk about what to do with all of that when we get to the section on optimizing. Campaign settings we'll talk about in a sec when we get to the section on campaigns, but you can see the settings for all of your campaigns at a glance by going to that settings tab. Now, if you've started inside of a campaign, what I mean by that is if you're inside of a campaign, maybe looking at the ad groups or the keywords, say, inside that campaign, and then you click on settings, you're just going to see the campaign settings just for that one campaign. But if you start by viewing all campaigns, which is coming sort of all the way up to the top level, then click on settings, you're going to see the campaign settings for all of the campaign settings, and at which point you'll see that additional option right at the top of your screen in the middle for account settings. If you're not seeing account settings, it's because you're inside of one particular campaign when you click on settings. So you need to come all the way out of your account and look at that high level view across everything. And this can be really useful for just comparing campaigns. So once you get a few campaigns up and running, you just want to make sure there's some consistency between those campaigns. Are they showing at the same times of day, for instance, or are they using the same method of delivery, and a whole bunch of things like that. And then just one other that I'm going to focus on, so I've skipped over a few here. You don't need to worry about them yet. There's a useful tab there called Change History, and that will tell you almost all, not every single thing, unfortunately, but almost all of the changes that have happened recently in the account. And again, depending on what you were viewing before you click on Change History will depend on what this thing shows. So if you're inside of a campaign, it'll show you the changes made inside that campaign recently. If you're inside an ad group, it'll show you just the changes inside that ad group. So it's all context dependent. It works out what you're looking at, and because you've clicked on this thing next, it says, oh, okay, you probably want to see just this then. Now, across the top of the screen, you've got three other options. So the go-to is quite interesting. There's some useful shortcut keys there. I'm not going to go through those in the interest of time, but if you want, there is a really, really good Google Ads Help Center. You can just search through that for shortcut keys and find a little list. The one I find myself using all the time is GC. So if you just tap on G and then tap on C on your keyboard, that means go to campaigns, and you go back out to that campaign view And that's typically where you're going to start all of your analysis. You start usually on the campaign tab, and then you'll drill down and fix some stuff, and then you'll come back out and then drill down again and come back up and fix some stuff. And it's that process of zooming in, zooming out. If you've ever played strategy games, whether that's Command and Conquer or even chess, then if you love those sorts of things, zoom up across the whole level, zoom into the detail and build the farm over there. Now zoom back up to the high level and go over there and fight that battle against the things, orcs, trolls, I don't know. Like that sort of stuff makes for a good Google Ads manager. That ability to zoom in and out quickly. On the Tools tab, I'm going to skip over reports for now, but on that Tools tab, there are these 5 columns. Almost all of this stuff you can ignore for now. I'm going to cover the important bits when we get there. The only thing I haven't covered in great detail that you will need is billing and payments. So that one up in the top right hand corner. So you can create an account, and I think it's still the case that you can go and create a campaign and get things up and running, build your ad groups, write some ads and so on. But until you put a credit card number in the system, then none of that's going to run. If you go through an agency, by the way, too, you almost certainly can get, it varies, but somewhere around about $75 to $100 worth of credit. So if you're just looking to run a very small scale account and just spend a few bucks a day, then worth talking to a friendly agency. Give me a shout. If it's linked and part of our agency account, we can almost certainly get you a credit just to get you up and running. Now, we don't manage accounts that small on an ongoing basis, but yeah, let's get you some promo dollars to get things kicked off. And if, as I'm going through this, or just over time, you come up against new words that you don't know the meaning of, then please go have a look at this glossary. I think there's about 180 terms that are listed on here. And again, think back to that advice from Kiyosaki. Just understanding the meanings of a few words greatly increases your understanding of the whole game. Once you know what a campaign is, what a conversion is, what CPA means, what ROAS means, these few things, then everything makes much more sense. So I'll give you a couple of short codes throughout this course. All the short codes I use are GOO.GL, as you see at the top of the screen, / and then the 6 characters that come after that are case sensitive, so please make sure you jot that down quickly. Or of course you can just do a search for Google Ads Help Center Glossary. That'll get you to that page. So we're going to start by pulling apart the various building blocks of Google. We've talked about campaigns hold ad groups and ad groups hold keywords and ads. So we're going to start with keywords. We're going to do it back to front so that you do your research first by thinking about what are people searching for, and then we're going to write some ads, and then we're going to put them all together in ad groups and campaigns. Now this is obviously one of the biggest differences to Facebook. In Facebook, you're going to be thinking in terms of audiences and usually in terms of interests or past behaviors like a remarketing list. But with Google Ads, the main way of targeting, and you can certainly target various audiences on both search as well as shopping and display in YouTube, but predominantly when we're talking search, we're going to be talking about keywords and using keywords to decide our targeting, use keywords to get in front of the right people. There's 3 levels of keyword. People researching, and then they go into comparison mode, and then they're looking to buy. So for the most part, we are going to focus on the buyers first, because if you can't make money down there at the bottom of the funnel, it's very unlikely that you're going to make top of funnel work. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to make a profitable campaign with people that aren't really ready to buy yet. They're just researching. They're just having a bit of a poke around. They're on their computer at work, trying not to get caught by the boss, just in early stages of vaguely thinking about something. When they get down to the bottom of the funnel and use a phrase like buy KN55S9 near me, then they're pulling the credit card out of the purse and they're ready to go. So let's start there, what I call the bullseye terms, the ones that are most likely to be profitable for you, and then we can grudgingly work our way up the funnel, going after some comparison terms next, and then the really broad stuff later, maybe. But almost certainly, and there's a few use cases where you might do this, but most of the time, until you get really, really good at Google Ads, you can ignore that top yellow layer entirely. Now, this is a really important distinction to make. So this is partly me being very precise and technical with my language, but it's also a really key distinction that is really important to get with Google Ads. And that's the difference between keywords and search terms or search queries. You can use those two terms interchangeably. The keyword is what goes into your account, for example, Samsung TV, and that acts like a magnet and attracts a variety of search terms. For instance, Samsung 4K TV or TV from Samsung, etc. Now, it wouldn't attract a term like buy new TV for the most part, because that's not similar enough. It doesn't have enough magnetic pull, if you like, so that the stuff down the right hand side is what people are actually typing into Google. And if someone has typed in buy new TV, the keyword that you control that lives over here in your Google Ads account, if there's not enough similarity between those two things, then your ad won't show. Google wants to show ads that best match, that are the most highest relevance ads that they can possibly show. And it's this relevance between the keyword and the search term that is the driving force behind the whole game, really. But also just to get that terminology right. So people type in search terms or search queries. Keywords are what you type in. That's what lives inside your Google Ads account. And part of this ongoing optimization is that you're going to regularly review the list of search terms that people have used, the list of search terms that caused your ads to be displayed and go get clicks, and you're going to compare that to your keywords. And every now and again you're going to see something like, I don't know, Samsung TV remote control, and you go, well, hang on a minute, I'm selling TVs, not remote controls. I need to do something about that. We'll talk about what that is in a second. So how many? That's the question I always get asked with people that haven't set up a Google Ads account before, and even a few that have. But how many keywords should I have? I'm going to suggest you start with just 1 to 3 themes. So groups of similar keywords. And again, go for the bullseye. Go for the stuff at the bottom of the funnel, the stuff that is implying, the search term that if somebody is typing this thing in, they've done their research, they're ready to buy. You want to start with buying terms, not general information researchy terms. And I'm going to suggest that you try and find somewhere between 1 to 10 keywords for each of those themes, just to keep this easy for your first campaign. Yes, we run campaigns that might have thousands or tens of thousands, occasionally hundreds of thousands of keywords at a campaign level. You don't need thousands and thousands for your first one. That's just going to add a whole load of complexity, both to the setup, but then obviously to the ongoing management of that campaign. So start with a few, get that profitable first, and then we can worry about everything else. How do you find keywords? Best place to start is you thinking like your client. Put yourself in your client's shoes, or your prospect's shoes, I should say, and what might they search for? If they were sitting down at the computer, what might they search for? But then sense check that. I've seen some pretty crazy lists that people come up with when left to their own devices. They assume that people are going to search a particular way. So sense check that. Talk to your team. Talk to existing clients. Talk to friends and family if need be. Hey, if you were looking to buy this thing that I sell, how would you search for that? What words would you use? And you'll be amazed. I've done this exercise with a room full of people. I show them a picture and say, give me 3 words to describe that. If you were searching for this, what would you use? And amongst 30 people in a room, you might come up with 20 different phrases. People are weird. We all use our own different lens to view things through. We use our own different turns of phrase and different words. So definitely sense check it. There are tools that you can use. So under that tools thing that I showed you right at the beginning, and I said you can ignore most of this for now, over on the left hand side There's a free tool inside your Google Ads account called the Keyword Planner. You can use that. You can put a word in there and say, hey, give me all of the related keywords to this. Tell me all the stuff, all the different ways that people search for this particular thing. And there are paid tools, but honestly, you don't need those yet. There are use cases for those things, but for the most part, they're not particularly accurate, and you certainly don't need to be spending money on research anyway. Remember, this is just a starting point. You don't need to obsess about getting the perfect list of keywords. It's going to change over time. You're going to be reviewing the search query list, the search terms that people type in, and you're going to be changing your keywords based on that. And I debated long and hard about whether to include this and have I got time to talk about match types, but I thought it's worth doing. There are these things called match types. At the top here we have exact match, denoted by the square brackets. So the left hand side is the keyword, the right hand side is the search query, just as we had it before. Then we have things like phrase match, which is putting the double quotes around the keyword. So exact match only matches, and there are tiny little areas where this is not the case, but for the most part only matches the exact search query. So it matches the exact, hence exact match. So in other words, if your keyword is an exact match keyword, it's quite limiting, but it's also quite safe. You know exactly who's going to see your ad. Only those people that have typed in those two words, and only those two words in that order, they're the only people that are going to see your ad. Now, if you move to phrase match, you're expanding out the universe of people that you can show ads to a little bit. So by targeting the phrase Samsung TV, you're saying that these two words have to be in the search query in that order with nothing in between them, but there can be other words before and or after. So best Samsung TV, Samsung TV deal, Samsung TV near me, but not Samsung Red TV, because that doesn't include the phrase Samsung TV. So you start to broaden it out a little bit, but you also start to get the odd few weird search queries, and you start to potentially show ads to people that you don't really want to show ads to. But it's safer than what's called a modified broad match term, which basically says to Google, by having the plus signs in your keyword, it says these words have to be in the search query somewhere, but as long as they're in there anywhere, I don't really care. And so that's really broadening it out. And then you have this thing called a broad match keyword, which basically says if they're vaguely connected, if the search query and the keyword are vaguely connected, then show my ad. I'm going to suggest for your very, very first Google Ads account, you stick to exact match. Yes, you're going to limit the number of people that you can show ads to, but if you can't make that profitable, then you ain't going to make broad match profitable. For the most part, I advise staying well away from broad match for your first sort of few months, maybe even your first year of playing with Google Ads. There are certainly cases where you want to use phrase and modified broad, but for now, just stick to exact match. So use the square brackets or find the little drop down in your Google Ads account next to the keyword and choose exact match when you're creating the keywords in your account. And the last thing we need to cover with keywords is this thing called a negative keyword. And negative keywords, or negs, stop your ads appearing. So in other words, if my negative keyword is free and the search query is free Samsung TV, then I'm telling Google, if this negative keyword is in that search query somewhere, I don't want to show this person the ad. So if you only sold new TVs, then things like secondhand or vintage would be good negative keywords. Now you don't need to worry about negs if you do follow my advice and only use exact match keywords, because you're not going to run into trouble with exact match keywords. But once you move on to phrase and modified broad match types, then you're going to need more negatives to give you control over who sees your ads. So let's move on to the ads that they're actually going to see. So for all of the work that you're going to do with your Google Ads account, this is the only part of the account that's visible to the person on the other side of the screen. So you do all of this work behind the scenes to choose keywords, to put them into ad groups, to work out what the bids should be. The ad is the only bit the other person gets to see. And obviously the ad is a lot shorter than your typical Facebook ad as well. So again, typically 3 or 4 ads at the top of the page, regardless of device these days. That's the same for desktop, tablet, and mobile. Often 4 ads at the top and usually around about 3 ads at the bottom of the page. Now, these are always changing. Google's always changing the rules on these, always trying to squeeze a little bit more in, trying to make these ads a little bit bigger, pushing all of the organic content further down the page, so that now these days you pretty much have to scroll to get to any of the free stuff. Google is a money-making machine, closing in on $100 billion a year. They do that by putting more and more ads at the top of the page, bigger ads. Yes, we'll move on. Right, this is what it looks like inside your account. So I'll give you the exact list of components in a minute, and you may not see exactly this. It is going through a process of change at the moment, but running our eyes down the left-hand side, you have a final URL. That is the page that you want somebody to end up on. In this case, the home page of briantracy.com. But that could be a page inside your website. It doesn't have to be the home page. That's your starting point. Where do I want this person to end up? Then you're going to have at least a couple of headlines. You may see the option for a third headline inside your account. So this is, this is the thing that does 80% of the job of the ad. The headline. Spend most of your time on the headline. You've got to attract someone's attention quickly and give them that benefit quickly and say, yep, you're in the right place. I can help you. I know what your problem is. I've got the solution to that problem. The display path, if you look across to the right hand side of the screen, you can see in green how that gets displayed. So you don't get to control the root domain, the briantracy.com bit here that's grayed out, but you do get to add 1 or 2 paths to the end of that URL. So that's an extra 30 characters of space that you get to use. I'd highly recommend that you test putting something in there, benefit driven if possible. So that doesn't have to reflect the actual page that someone is landing on. So you can see here, this was sending someone the final URL, again, was the home page, but my display path, achieve your goals, just gets that added little punch of the benefit in there, even though that isn't the actual page. I'm not sending somebody to bt.com/achieve-your/goals. That's just extra copy. And then 1 or 2 descriptions. Again, you can see the big new splat next to description 2 here. Again, this is a relatively recent, I'm recording this at the end of 2018, a relatively recent test that appears that Google will roll out fully to all accounts, where you can now have 2 description lines. So you get a fair whack of content in a Google ad these days. It used to be that we just had 95 characters to play, 95 characters to play with. Now we have almost 300 characters to play with. And you can ignore the URL options down at the bottom left corner of the screen there. So just to recap, we have a final URL. We have up to 3 headlines. They can be up to 30 characters each. You don't have to use all 30 characters, but you cannot go over that. A couple of display paths, 15 characters each, and up to 2 descriptions, 90 characters each. They used to be 80, now they're up to 90. Now the next thing, once you've got an ad written, the next thing you want to be able to do, is to test a new ad against that. Now this is in the process of changing too, but let's understand the fundamentals before we worry about the new funky features. And this doesn't matter whether you're doing text ads on the left hand side, or later on when you get to banner ads, that could be display or maybe remarketing, or even 2 different videos tested against each other over on YouTube. The concept is still the same. We want to test because we don't know which one is going to work best. And so this is part of the game where we're constantly making changes. We're constantly looking at our results and then coming up with new ideas. How do we expand on those good results, and how do we maybe pause or remove ads that haven't worked as well? So always have at least 2 ads in each of your ad groups. Google say these days best practice is 3, and that's because their machine learning prefers to have more things to choose between. Entirely up to you. I certainly wouldn't go more than 4. Once you start getting more than 4 ads in an ad group, the data is so thinly spread between all of those ads, unless you have tens of thousands of clicks a day, you're really just not going to learn anything by having 7, 8, 9 ads in an ad group. So you want 2 or 3 ads per ad group, and try and have big differences. There's not much difference at all in the headlines between these 2 ads on the left hand side, but try and have big differences, especially between your headlines. The headline is far more important than the description. And so I'm saying test, but what are you going to test? Well, start with the headline. So if you had ad A and ad B, if ad B had exactly the same 2 description lines as your first ad, and all you did was change the 3 headlines, that's fantastic. So you don't have to change everything in an ad. Start by trying headlines. Spend 80% of your testing time and your thinking time coming up with new headlines. What's the call to action in the ad? What are you asking people to do? Are you talking about benefits in the ad? How are you wording the benefit? You probably, with a product or service that you sell, you probably have 2 or 3 or 4 main benefits to someone. Don't try and jam them all into one ad. Have 2 different ads talking about how this improves their lifestyle, and the other big thing is that it gives them more free time. 2 different benefits. Test 1 per ad and see which one resonates the most with your market. See which one gets you the best results. And then I mentioned that display path before. Use that extra space. Use that extra 30 characters that Google are giving you to squeeze in or reinforce those benefits that you've mentioned elsewhere in the ad. Now I'm going to give you another URL here, again, case sensitive, or you can just Google Ads policies and you'll end up at the same page. I would highly recommend that you do spend a bit of time to read through the policies that are on that page. You don't want to run afoul of Google's policies. They will generally give you warnings, depending on how severe the violation is, but they are not very patient. It's all machine driven these days, so you might get an email saying there's a problem, you've got 48 hours to fix it. You get another email 24 hours later saying you still haven't fixed this, and another one 24 hours later saying you still haven't fixed this. Your account is suspended. So make sure you read through the policies so that your account doesn't get suspended. The main points of all of those pages, now bear in mind please, these policies are changing all the time and I can't summarize hundreds of pages in one slide, but I'm going to try. The main points: be clear and honest. Tell people what they're going to get. Make sure your site is working. I have to admit here that I have been guilty of that in the very recent past. We changed our website a couple of weeks ago and didn't realize that some of our ads were still pointing at an old URL which now went to a 404 page. I have been whinging about people making that mistake for about 13 years and I did it. So please make sure your site is working. Make sure that all of your ads go to live pages and not 404 pages. That's always good. Use the correct spelling. Google won't let you use sort of gimmicky things like $, instead of the word money. You can't write a Google ad the same way you would write a text message. You can't use short, shall we call it teenager speak? I know I'm an old grumpy man now, but let's call it teenager speak. You can't put your phone number in the ad copy. I'll show you how you can add your phone number to your ad, but it can't be part of that ad copy. It can't be in the headline or the description. And you can't use exclamation points in headlines. You are allowed to use one in the description somewhere, but only one. You can't have it in the headline. But you can have question marks and most other punctuation as long as it's used in the sort of correct way. You can't use punctuation marks or emojis and so on in your ad copy. And there are also these things called ad extensions, which, like the name suggests, extend your ads. They add a bit more information to your ad. And there's a whole range of these, but this sort of stuff that I've highlighted here, these are all extensions. There's stacks of these. There's about a dozen different types of extension. If you were only going to do 2, I would stick to site links and call out extensions, those top 2 that I've listed there. But for bonus points, you want to be an overachiever, then by all means play with structured snippets and then call extensions. That's how you add your phone number to an ad. Use a thing called a call extension, and that sort of bolts your phone number on underneath the ad, but you can't put that phone number in the copy itself. All right, so we've done some research, and obviously before that we got very clear on our numbers, and we also got clear, I didn't mention it really in great detail here at all, or in any detail actually, but we've got clear on that persona. Who are we going after? Which group of people do we want to show these ads to, and where are they at? What's the conversation going on in their head? Because we want to meet them where they are. We don't want to smack them over the head, drag them kicking and screaming and saying, I'm over here, this is what you should be thinking about. They're thinking about what they're thinking about. How can we meet them where they are? We've done our research, we've picked some keywords, we've written a few ads. We've started really, really simply. We haven't gone after hundreds of themes. We haven't had to write thousands of ads. We've got 1 to 3 themes, and we've got a couple of ads, maybe 3, for each of those themes. So maybe you've got 20 keywords and 6 ads at this point. Now we need to start running those by putting them inside a campaign. Now there's a bunch of different campaigns that you might run over time. If we're talking search, and that's all I'm going to focus on here for this hour that we have together, I would typically break that into brand terms and non-brand terms. So for example, my brand terms would be, say, Mike Rhodes, Web Savvy, or Agency Savvy, the name of my other business. So those are my brand terms. If somebody is typing in Agency Savvy into Google, they are looking for my business. That's a great place to start because it's very hard to get that wrong. The non-brand stuff is if people are searching for the things that you sell. So like we had Samsung TV before. Oh, that's a bit different, I suppose, because Samsung is a brand. But if you were a TV shop and you sold TVs, then a brand term is the name of your shop. The non-brand terms are things like TV, remote control. And then in the middle, we've got this kind of quasi thing where they're searching for the products you sell, but a brand might be part of that. That was a really bad example because that's sort of the in-between case. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I'm not going to talk about shopping and display here, but I am going to suggest that probably the second campaign that you go set up is remarketing. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit of detail at the end of this, kind of a little sort of bonus module on the end of this course. And then I've mentioned you've got YouTube. There's all kinds of dynamic campaigns that you can run, dynamic search ads or DSA campaigns, dynamic remarketing campaigns, which is great if you're an e-com store, but we'll worry about that another day. Why might we have more than one search campaign? Well, we might have different types of keyword, certainly our brand and our non-brand terms. We might want to run a different campaign for each location that we're in. So maybe that's one for Australia, one for the States, one for the UK. If you wanted to run ads for different cities, if you want to get the city name in the ad, the easiest way, there are other ways, but the easiest way is to have different campaigns. So I might have one campaign for LA, one for Chicago, and one for New York. So then I might have 3 different campaigns. If you wanted to show the same ad to all 3 groups of people, then you don't need 3 different campaigns. But if you want to change the ad copy, if you want people in different places to see different ad copy, then use different campaigns for each location. Or different products. So maybe you sell doors and windows and shower screens. Just thinking back to an old client. You could certainly have ad groups for doors and ad groups for windows and ad groups for shower screens all in the one campaign. You could do that, but they're probably going to behave quite differently. You know, the number of people looking for those 3 products is going to vary, and you're generally going to have, let's just say, loads more people searching for doors each month than search for shower screens. The results are probably going to vary too. your CPA, your cost per lead or your cost per sale, is very unlikely to be the same for those three very different types of products. And so in order to run the account effectively, to be able to tell what's going on from that high level view, you would probably put those into 3 different campaigns. Again, you don't have to when you're starting out, but it's just going to be good practice. It's going to make it easier for you over time to manage that account. And if there's anything else where you've got hugely different CPAs, so again, that's probably going to be because they're slightly different products. Maybe you're a furniture store and you've got lamps that sell for $30 and dining room tables that sell for $6,000. You're going to want to put those things in different campaigns because you're going to manage those very differently. How much you're going to bid for each click for those 2 different items is going to vary, obviously, because the profit varies enormously between those different things. So once you've worked out what your various campaigns are going to be, and again, just start with one, then you've got to pick some campaign settings. So I'm just going to very, very quickly read down the list on the left-hand side. So starting with campaign name, campaign status. So campaign name, pick a name that makes sense to you. Pick a name that's going to tell you at a glance what is inside this campaign. So for us, we use a naming convention. We know this is a brand campaign. It's running ads in Australia, and this is running ads on the Google Search Partner and the Google Search Network. So PS is partner and search. Just no idea why we still use that, but that was the naming convention we came up with 10 years ago, and we're still using it. Campaign status enabled obviously means this is up and running. Now, goal is a bit of a weird one, but when you set up the campaign, and I'll show you this in the bonus bit about remarketing at the end, Google have a whole bunch of different goals that you can choose from. I typically pick the no goal, or how do they word it? No marketing objective or something like that. It sounds like you're doing something wrong, but it gives you more options later on. And if you're going to maybe make changes later on, I want as many options as I can possibly get. I don't want Google to give me a subset of features because I chose the wrong thing when I was setting up. So I typically will choose no goal or no marketing objective, however they word that, but I'll show you that later on. Networks. So for the most part, for our search campaigns, we're going to run across the Google Search Network. There are also a whole bunch of sites. There is no published list of these called search partners. It's just a bit of extra traffic, sometimes a lot of extra traffic. I used to teach for your first campaign, turn search partners off, but the results are pretty good these days. It's pretty hard to go horribly wrong with search partners, so by all means, leave that on. Then you're going to pick a location. Where do you want your ads to show? A language, a daily budget, and then bidding. Although this one is using a target CPA, I'm going to suggest that you start off with a manual bidding. So at the beginning, you won't have any data. And if you're going to use one of the machine's automatic bidding strategies, the machine needs data in order to play with that, in order to try and figure out how much it should be bidding for every click. So start with manual bidding. You can always move to one of the more advanced automated strategies later on. You can, if you want, set an end date, something that we almost never use, but if you know that this campaign is only going to run for a set amount of time, or you want all these ads turned off after Black Friday and you never want to run this campaign again, then you can set an end date, and you can ignore DSA or dynamic search and additional settings. You can ignore those for now. So we've got a campaign set up. Now we need to go build some ad groups. And I said I'd give you a different way of visualizing this, a different way of picturing this. So the way I've always thought of ad groups is that they're buckets. And a bucket contains a bunch of keywords. Remember, we said generally it's probably going to be between about 1 to 10 keywords when we're starting out. And on the front of that bucket is slapped on an ad or 2 or 3. Ideally, at least 2 ads and no more than 4 for every one of our buckets, for every one of our ad groups. And what that means is that every time someone searches for a search query that matches one of our keywords, they're going to see at random one of the ads on the front of our bucket. Obviously, they're not going to see both ads. They're only going to see one. And over time, we're going to get to see the stats of which ad performed best. Now, this is the wrong way to set up a Google Ads account, to have one ad group in your campaign with loads and loads and loads and loads of keywords in that one bucket. Because again, remember, if the search query matches the keyword that's in that bucket, they're going to randomly see one of the ads that's slapped on the front of that bucket. So if you do it this way, it basically means you have no control. I've seen accounts with 300 keywords in an ad group. And what you're saying to the machine is, if any of those 300 pop up, if someone's searching for something that matches any one of those 300 keywords, then show the ad on the front of the bucket. Now, the very, very unlikely that that ad is going to be as relevant as it could be to all 300 of those terms. Think of it as 300 different people. 300 different people searching, maybe only slightly differently, but they're searching differently. Do they all really want to see the same ad? Instead, what we want to do is to theme our keywords. Now, when we talked about research, we've covered that, so you've already done that. The way you've done your research is by thinking in terms of themes. Now we're just simply going to turn each of your themes into different ad groups. If you want to be really, really granular with this, some setups, and we'll typically use this, although that's changing a little over time, but for the last few years we have done this where each ad group will only contain one keyword. Now that means I've got to do more work at the beginning to write more ads, because instead of 3 ad groups I might have 30 ad groups, but it does give me the most control, where I can really, really tailor the ad copy to exactly match, or to really, really closely align with, be as relevant as possible to the search that that person just did. But don't do that when you're starting out. That's too much work. You're going to start obsessing, and you're going to take days and days over the setup. Trying to write 60 ads across 30 ad groups, just don't do that at the beginning. Start with just one ad group for each theme, write a couple of ads, and remember 1 to 10 keywords in each theme. And then, just as a rough rule of thumb, can I fit all of the different words in my keyword list? Can I fit all of those individual words into the one ad? So if I had, say, Samsung TV cost and Samsung TV price, they're similar enough that they can go in the same ad group when you're starting out. But Samsung TV remote control, if you sell remote controls, that belongs in its own remote control ad group, so that my ad can talk about remote controls and I can send people to the remote control page. OLED 55-inch Samsung TV, and make and model number of the particular 55-inch TV, great, that can all go in the same 55-inch ad group. That's fine, they're close enough. But Samsung TV and LG TV, well, they probably want to go into separate ad groups, because my ad copy and the landing page, that final URL that's part of my ad, they're probably going to be different for those two different terms. So just use your common sense and judgment. So this is just to recap the order of work that you're going to do. You're going to start by thinking about your goals and your personas and doing your research. But once you open up Google Ads, your first thing you're going to do is create the campaign with all of the settings. Then you're going to create your ad groups, and then you're going to add your keywords and your ads to those groups. Now, I mentioned that this is the best direct response machine ever built. The key thing that makes it work is the fact that it is measurable. So you absolutely must please set up some tracking. I can't tell you, it's late in 2018, 2 weeks to go until 2019, and I still see accounts that don't have any tracking set up. Without tracking, you're flying blind. Flying blind is dangerous. Amateurs fly by looking out the window. Professionals use instruments. You want to use instruments. You want to have numbers that tell you if you're heading in the right direction or not, so that you can make the appropriate change. Now, there's a bunch of different things that you can track. We're going to start off down the left hand side here by saying we want to track stuff related to our website. So we go to the tools section, that little wrench icon at the top, then look for the measurement column and then conversions, which the first time you go there is going to be blank. We're going to click on the big blue plus conversions, add a new conversion button. And once we've chosen the website option that I showed before, we've got a few different settings that I'm going to walk you through. So again, first thing is the name. Pick a name that's going to make sense to you. Doesn't matter what it is. You got 100 characters to play with. I prefer short names because I can fit more information into a space on the screen, and we're going to use these later on. We've got some reporting that we're going to do with this, maybe talking about these different conversions in emails. I like short names for my campaigns, for my ad groups, my conversions, but it really doesn't matter as long as that makes sense to you. It's about 5 different categories that you can pick from, leads, sales, other. Doesn't matter what you pick there. Again, just pick the one that makes the most sense to you. But value, please use a value for your conversions. Your reports will be much more meaningful if you pick something, even if that's just a guess, even if you use the same value for each conversion. And that's the option that I suggest you start with. If you're doing e-com, you can do some funky stuff where the actual revenue of each sale gets passed back into AdWords as the value for the conversion. So in other words, if a click leads to the sale of that light for $30, the value of 30 gets passed back. If you sell the dining room table for $6,000, then 6,000 gets passed back as the value for the conversion. But to begin with, use this option, use the same value for each conversion, and pick something, anything other than 0 in there. So if it's a lead, I don't care if you put in 1 or 10 or 100 or any other number, but just put something in there. It'll make all your reporting much more useful later on. Just please don't use that bottom option of don't use a value. Count is a confusing one, but in the interests of time, if you've got an e-com store, choose every. If you've got a lead gen website, choose 1, and then the rest of those don't need to change. Click on create and continue, and then it's going to prompt you to install this tag, the snippet of code on your site. So if you're familiar with code, by all means, hit the install the tag yourself and go down that route. If you have a dev that does this stuff for you, then you can email the code and all the instructions to you, choosing the middle option. Hopefully you're using Google Tag Manager on your site, but if this is the first time you've played with Google Ads and you've typically been a Facebook person up until now, you may not be using Google Tag Manager yet. I would highly recommend that you look into it. I've got a wonderful course on agencysavvy.com that Julian Yergman from measureschool.com created for the members. It walks through exactly how to use GTM or Google Tag Manager. I would highly recommend. You don't have to use Google's Tag Manager. There's loads of other options out there, but it's a brilliant tool. Makes life super easy. Means that you don't need to talk to devs every time you want to add code to your website. So it saves you money in the long term. And if you want to track phone calls, there's a free Google system, which is a good place to start. But if you want to do funky stuff, or if you just want to get a bit more detail over your call tracking, if you want to record phone calls, then we highly recommend callrail.com. They're in Australia, US, New Zealand, UK, a bunch of other countries. Really like these guys. Good tech, good reporting, really cheap rates. Honestly, you get, I think in the States, 10 phone numbers included in that $30 a month. I think here in Australia it's 4 numbers, but most of the time that's going to be enough. Okay, so you've got a campaign or maybe 2 or 3 campaigns up and running. Now you've got to optimize that over time. Remember, this is the opposite of set and forget. Essentially, the whole game I can sum up for you in 4 words. More good, less bad. That's the game that we're playing here. How do we get more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff? And so I'm going to give you my CEO method. Checks, expansion, and optimization. And this is roughly going to be a 10-10-80. So you're going to spend about 10% of your time making checks, making sure that nothing is out of whack. 10% of your time thinking about how could I expand this? How could I use the data that I have to go get more of this, to expand this out, to find some new keywords or find some new targeting options, or maybe create some additional pages on my website based on what I know about how people are using my website right now. But most of your time, 80% of your time, is going to be spent optimizing what you already have. Remember we said the structure and the tracking is rarely going to change. So once you've got that campaign set up, the actual structure of that campaign, the campaign settings and why you created that campaign, that probably isn't going to change. You might have more than one campaign, you might set up new campaigns over time, but that stuff rarely changes. What you track on your website rarely changes. But testing new ads, finding new keywords, tweaking bids if you're not using the automatic bidding strategies, which you can't on day one at the beginning. It's really good that you learn how to do it manually, I believe, so that when you do use automated bidding later on, you know if it's behaving itself, you know how to think, you know how to manage that, to start with manual bidding. So this is the stuff that you'll be doing on a, let's say, weekly basis until you're spending sort of more than a few grand a month. You probably don't need to be doing a lot of this stuff daily, but you do want to be logging in occasionally and doing it. I saw a crazy stat once, which was something like 50% of all AdWords accounts spending under $1,000 a month, I think it was, haven't been logged into in the last 12 months. So they've been set up once, credit cards in there, and they're running, and nobody goes back to improve them. Nobody goes back to check on results. That is insane, because that's what makes the whole game work. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to walk you through a ton of optimization, but I am going to give you my audit checklist. So this is a list of about 137 questions that we update and tweak every now and again. And this will give you a whole bunch of different questions to ask of your data, questions to ask of your Google account, which will point you in the right direction to make those changes. If we had another couple of hours, we'd talk about that in more detail. I've just earlier this month actually recorded a new course for the guys inside of agencysavvy.com. I've got a whole, I think it's an hour and a half long module just on optimizing your account. That's the one thing I'm finding that my members want more and more and more information about, is how do I make this better? I get that it's more good, less bad, but how, Mike? How? Give us more. So that'll get you started. If you want more, then I'd love to see you over at agencysavvy.com. Come and join us. We've got a great Facebook group. We do monthly Q&As, curated podcast, a whole bunch of stuff in there, as well as all the courses. I think well over a dozen courses, well over 100 hours of material at this point, but that's all at Agency Savvy. Now, I said that your second campaign would likely be a remarketing campaign. The reason for that is this is kind of the next easiest campaign to make money on after your brand campaign. So not having a remarketing campaign means you're leaving money on the table. It's relatively easy to get right. It's relatively hard to stuff up. It's also, I'm going to assume that if you are coming at this from a Facebook background, you're familiar with the concept of remarketing, so I'm not going to walk through the basics of that, and I'm assuming that this is something that's working for you on Facebook. So now how do we just expand that out further? Because remember, with remarketing, you're not just remarketing to people that came in on an AdWords ad. You can remarket to all of the traffic on your website. Even if 90% of your traffic right now comes from Facebook, maybe you're spending 100 grand a month on Facebook and you're only remarketing to those people on Facebook. Well, if you add remarketing across Google's display network, across Gmail, across YouTube to that, you are almost guaranteed to make more sales. So, a couple of steps to this one. First step is you need to create the tag, the snippet of code that goes on each page of your site. So, Tools, Shared Library, Audience Manager, which the first time you go will be blank. Click on the big blue plus, and we're going to add a new list first of all. So audience lists, and then we're going to add a remarketing list for website visitors. Don't worry about all the other options yet. And then we're going to quickly, again, a few settings. So audience name, so in this case, all visitors that have been to anywhere on the site in the last 30 days. And I need to create a rule to define my audience. So in this case, the simplest rule I can do is that the URL contains yourdomainname.com. So if I wanted to build a remarketing list of everybody that has seen product A, I could say URL contains product A. If I wanted to build a list of all of my blog readers, then I might say URL contains /blog. If for some bizarre reason I wanted to build a list of everybody that read my privacy policy page, then URL contains privacy-policy. I could, if I wanted to, build that audience. So you use rules to build different audiences. And then a couple of options further down, membership duration. How long does somebody stay on that list? So for your first couple, just stick with 30 days. If you want some more ideas for how to use different lists and different durations, then just do a search for Mike Rhodes Remarketing Grid. It's a massive blog post that I wrote for the guys over at Digital Marketer a couple of years ago now, maybe 2015. But yeah, that's a long one. Sit down with a glass of your favorite beverage and work your way through that. And in there, I talk all about how to use different durations and different use cases. But for now, just stick to 30 days. So once we've got that, then we need to pick a source for this audience. So you're probably going to choose Google Ads or Google Analytics at this point. Let's stick with Google Ads or AdWords. Leave everything on here as is, that standard data option. You don't really need to worry about all the other stuff. And again, we're going to get a piece of code that spits out the other end and some options of how to go install that onto your site. If you know what you're doing, feel free to download the snippet. Otherwise, send it to your friendly web geek and let them take care of it. So that's the code created. Now we've got to quickly build a very simple display campaign. So the first time we came in here, choose a campaign, we chose search. Now we're going to choose display, because for now we're going to try and run our remarketing ads across the Google Display Network. Let's leave YouTube for later. This interface may have changed by the time you see it, but again, remember I talked before about create a campaign without a goal, just because that gives me all of the available options. If I do want to change something with my campaign later on, I can probably do it. If I choose sales or leads or website traffic at the top, it's going to restrict what I can do later on. And please do not use Smart Display Campaign. Basically, hand over all control to the machine, both in terms of targeting and bidding. In other words, the machine decides who gets to see this ad and how much you're going to pay. You don't want to do that, at least not yet. Maybe later in 2019 when it's working better, but right now you want a standard display campaign. You want control. You want to determine how this thing behaves. Usual story, we got a bunch of campaign settings. Again, pick a sensible name, something that makes sense to you, a location and language that makes sense. Bidding, we're going to start with manual bidding again, and then pick a budget, probably something fairly low so you can't do too much damage. $5, $10, $20 a day. Then within that campaign, we're going to create an ad group. Again, pick a sensible name. And this time, instead of keywords, we're going to have an audience. So remember before, ad groups contained keywords and ads. This time, they're going to create audience and ads. Generally, just one audience is fine. So under the audience section here, we've got a few choices. We're interested in remarketing, so how they've interacted with your business. And then you're probably just going to have the one audience list or one audience name in this big long list here. I've got a whole bunch in this account that I took the screenshot from, but you're probably just going to have the one. So you're going to add it from the left hand side to the right hand side. Over on the left hand side is the big list of everything in your account. Over on the right hand side is what is going to go into this particular ad group. So we add that. We're going to set a bid. So this time we're going to bid this at the ad group level. With our search campaigns, you could have bid that at the keyword or ad group level. We didn't actually talk too much about that. My apologies. But to begin with, let's just say bid everything at the ad group level. You can get really picky in search, and you can have one keyword bid higher than another keyword, but to make things simple for your first campaign, just bid at the ad group level. We're going to do the same thing here. You can ignore the other funkier settings, and then we just need to go create an ad. So actually relatively similar to the process of creating that text ad before. Obviously the difference this time is we have some images. There's no images in search ads, but here we're going to add some images at the top left, add assets. So we're just going to follow the prompt there, upload those. It'll even scan your website and go find images for you, but generally those images aren't going to be the best to use in ads, so you're probably going to go ask a graphic designer to create some ads for you. I'm not going to go into great detail here about all the various sizes for that, but my tip would be to use the responsive ads first for your first remarketing campaign. And then very, very similar to before, we've got headlines. We've got a long headline and a description. They're both 90 characters. Google's going to use them for slightly different things. A business name and a final URL. So very, very similar as before, and you can ignore the more options for now. And that's it. Then you're up and running. So you've got an ad that is showing to that audience, which in this case was everybody that's been to my website in the past 30 days. The ad and the audience go inside an ad group, which in this case is the only ad group we need inside our remarketing campaign. And there you go. That's the 3.5 minute version of how to get your first remarketing campaign up and running. You made it. You made it to the end. Where are we? 81 minutes. Well, that was okay. If you want more of this, if this has piqued your interest and you decide, yes, I want to dig deeper into this, I want to know how to do remarketing better, I want to understand non-brand or shopping, maybe you're an e-com store and you really, really should be, I think, in that case, running shopping ads. We've got courses on shopping, courses on reporting. We love a tool called Google Data Studio, so I go into that in some detail. We've got a 10-hour deep dive into the Google Display Network. I mentioned before, Justin Brook is running this campaign at the moment, trying to get to 10,000 leads per day. That is possible on the Google Display Network. It is a wonderful place to get in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of people every single day. We've got YouTube information in there, Gmail, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager. So tons of courses in there. 2 monthly Q&A calls. So I do one every month on the new Google stuff, and Trevor, who runs the Facebook department here at WebSavvy, he does one every month on Facebook. So a chance for you to jump in, ask questions about what's been bugging you, or why isn't this campaign working? I've been trying this. How can I help? We've got a really, really vibrant Facebook community with hundreds of marketers at all levels. So please don't think like, oh, I'm just starting out, this would be a bit beyond me. No question is a stupid question. Well, yeah, okay, sometimes there are stupid questions, but almost no question is a stupid question. Please dive in and ask them. I'm in there every day. This is not one of those groups where, you know, the creator, the founder says, oh, I'm going to be in there once a month between 9 and 10 p.m. and if you're lucky, we might just bump into each other and ask you. I'm in there every single day answering questions. Probably shouldn't do that when I'm away on holiday, but I often do because I like helping out. We've got a podcast which launches to members first, and we've got an app coming, so you'll be able to access all of that course material from your favorite device wherever you are. We would love to have you there. This is my absolute joy. I love helping other people build the business. One of those courses, by the way, actually the main course that kicked off Agency Savvy is I think 12-hour or something like that course on how to grow your agency. That's what I'm super, super passionate about these days, is helping people that are building their own agency, how to do that better, how to grow, whether that's hiring your first person or growing from a team of 5 to a team of 15. That means creating and documenting systems and processes. It means working on your mindset. We talk about that a lot in the Agency Owners Blueprint course. Yeah, there's tons of stuff. So I would love to see you there. Thank thank you for entertaining me and allowing me to talk about that. Molly, I hope this was everything you're after. If anybody's still listening here at the end, then thank you for following Molly and Ezra. They are wonderful, wonderful people. You can't go wrong listening to people like that. So my name's Mike Rhodes. Hopefully I'll see you on agencysavvy.com soon. Bye for now.